watching Morning at NTV.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. According to a new report titled "The Global Cost of Internet Shutdowns in 2019, Sub-Saharan Africa forewent $2 billion due to the 7,800-hour effects of Internet shutdowns. Chad lost, that is $84 million to 4,728 hours of bandwidth access, as Ethiopia and Zimbabwe lost $57 million and $35 million respectively. But how can African governments in that regard find the middle ground between internet freedom and freedom of expression? That is the $64,000 question. And for more on this, we are joined by Mr. Gilbert Sendugwa, the Executive Director of the African Freedom of Information Center right there. Thank you for joining us and a very good morning.
Thank you, Ramiro. Thank you for hosting me.
So help us understand
Uganda's,
Uganda's compliance with the Declaration on the Principles of the African Rights on the Internet Rights and Freedom.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, as you have rightly said, there have been violations
all over Sub-Saharan Africa.
All over Sub-Saharan Africa and beyond. And therefore, this declaration seeks to make a contribution on how do you ensure that the rights are not violated, while at the same time, excesses are regulated. And what we see from all the cases that we have noted where internet shutdowns and disruptions have happened in Africa, including Uganda, by the way, they have been arbitrary, they have been costly. As you have rightly said, that money is needed to develop people, is needed to make sure that mothers can get access to better health, children can get access to good quality education. And then also, in many instances, they are arbitrary, in the sense that in nearly all the cases, you don't see eminent or justifiable action to take these drastic measures. So what this declaration seeks to do is to actually implement provisions of Article 19.3 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which recognizes that freedom of expression can be restricted, but there must be circumstances, and these are that it should be provided for under the law, should seek to protect a right, guarantee national security, among others. Now, when you see this, what has been happening all over is that, you know, because people want to express themselves, let's shut down. The question is, are these expressions violent?
Indeed. Are they?
So there should be that determination, not someone to wake up and say, because there's going to be elections, for example, or there's likely to be a demonstration, let's shut down.
And of course, you've been carrying out an assessment when it comes to Uganda's compliance to the principles of the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms. What were your findings?
Yeah, first of all, the declaration provides for a number of principles that internet should be open, it should be accessible and affordable, it should guarantee and seek to promote and enhance the right of citizens' access to information, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, enhance and recognize people's right to development, protection of personal data, among others.
So how's Uganda been adhering to these principles?
What we find in this report is that on the issue of openness, for example, government regulations provide that government agencies should have websites which would enable people to access information about the government and what government agencies are doing. However, when you go to any website, you find that all of them, the information is in English. And therefore, people who are, don't understand English cannot access this information.
This is the internet we're talking about.
Yes,
But
because
Google,
the principle is...
Google has some languages in Uganda.
Yes, but we're
And
talking about
Swahili.
government website.
So
You know-
our very own government
Yes.
websites, like the Parliament website.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like the e-passport that is being expedited.
Yes.
So there's
National
need to,
water.
Yes, there's need to actually have other languages.
Yes, so that is accessible.
Okay.
Also, people with visual impairment
True.
are not in a position to access
So there's no inclusiveness.
information. There's no inclusiveness. And then also, the issue of affordability, this OTT tax is contrary to the principle of access and affordability that is established in AFDEC.
And Mr. Gilbert, it's going to get worse because the Commissioner General of URA, Doris Akol, is saying that they're going to shift the over-the-top tax from social media onto, and it will be charged directly on internet data.
Very
Do
unfortunately.
you think that
very,
is
very
right? Is it
unfortunate.
warranted?
Yeah, it is unfortunate.
And that would be the implication.
It is unfortunate because, first of all, when this tax was being introduced, the justification for it was that to stop Rugambo, rumor mongering.
Yes.
Then later it was said that no, it is to enable government correct taxes so that it can give services to the people. But then evidence has shown that this objective actually was not realized as the amount of money collected went down. Also, our report finds that Uganda in the East African community is the highest, it charges the highest. The cost of internet is about $4.06.
Second highest in the region.
And as compared, for example, to Rwanda, where it is less than $1. And so this is an area of concern which affects people's ability to enjoy their right.
So the viewer watching right now would be inclined to ask, do these laws actually achieve the targets of the government, or do they do the opposite, increasing pressure or opposition activities against the same?
Yeah, you see, a government has an obligation, as like I said that Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it says that people should have access to information and on all frontiers, irrespective of the frontiers, including the internet in this case. So therefore, in doing things, government should look at it from the point of an obligation to respect and protect rights as enshrined in treaties that it is party to. So that's an area. Now, we are not saying that the government should not correct taxes, for example. But in this particular case, we see that it is there's no balance between rights and the good intentions of government to correct taxes. We also find that online information requests, government agencies are not keen to respond to these information requests. For example, when you go to the Ask Your Government portal, askyourgov.ug, you find that many of the information requests are not responded to. And yet, we are saying that access should be irrespective of frontiers. So these requests, you find some agencies, 82 requests have not been answered, 119 information requests have not been answered. That is an area of concern. Also, we find that data protection, there are concerns, areas of concern and violations there, that surveillance is not targeted, and in some cases not justified.
Mr. Gideon, let's talk about cybersecurity. Do you think these laws are designed to deter online political activities in that regard?
Now, when you look at, for example, the number of cases that are being prosecuted, you'll find that most of them, if not all, less about security, but more about political or concerns about how people express themselves. And the government needs to reflect very deeper on this.
Because for the government, they defend themselves by saying they are trying to curtail the instigation of violence through the use of social media and the internet. So by curtailing the internet use, they're trying to limit the reach of those hateful messages. Do you buy into that?
You see, there are other ways to deal with that. You should not shut down or disrupt, but there is sufficient legal framework to deal with individual cases who violate, for example, who may use internet for hate and other areas and other issues.
There were so many major shutdowns in sub-Saharan Africa, cost the economy, the global economy, so much money, $8 billion in the whole of Africa. No, not even Africa, the whole of global economy. And then Africa alone, sub-Saharan, lost $2 billion because of those internet shutdowns. What are some of the major contributing factors leading to this? Why are governments behaving this way?
I think the issue of people trusting governments and government trusting people, and people feeling that they are trusted by government, and government feeling that it is trusted by people is critical, because when there is trust, everyone acts in good faith. But when one feels that they are not trusted, then they act in ways that are arbitrary, and they come out and use force that is not that is disproportionate. So I think this Africa definitely needs this money. 2 billion is a lot of money. It needs this money. Look at what it borrows. It can make a very huge difference in reducing the financing gap for governments. So what is important, therefore, is for governments to build trust by increasing access to information, by being more democratic. And representing the true will of the people, and making decisions that are for the people. Now, when that happens, trust will be increased, and there will be less of tension between people and the government, and there will be restraint on the side of government to take.
Let's talk about what your organization is doing, the African Freedom of Information Center. What are you doing to promote actually human rights standards and principles of openness in internet policy formulation on the African continent? Also implementation.
Yeah, first of all, for example, now we have just issued this report whereby we looked at international standards vis-a-vis national legislations and practices and came up with recommendations. And we hope that the government of Uganda is going to look at them favorably and implement them so that the situation can improve. Secondly, we also monitor compliance with these international obligations, particularly Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is Article 9 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and actually 5 other treaties of the African Union that guarantee this right. So we monitor and make shadow reports to different treaty bodies, but also we share this information with the government and encourage them to comply with these obligations. We also are involved in capacity building, training governments to be enhance capacities so that they implement the laws and also respect the obligations, but also building the demand citizen groups in different African
And demand
countries.
cannot be developed in that regard if internet costs are still high.
Yes.
But then, as you right there, let's talk about the issue, the fact that our elections are around the corner. 2021 is not too far. And 2020 is actually the year of rigorous campaigns. And we shall be seeing a lot of activities in that regard. So what do you think are some of the effects of strict internet policing on the mobilization efforts of a given country and voter education?
Yeah, first of all, in the case of Uganda, the Supreme Court engaged on this issue, and disruption of internet is one of the issues which was engaged by the Supreme Court, and they gave commands for government to implement and report within 2 years. We are concerned that government has not implemented and reported to the Supreme Court, and we are going into the next elections when those issues have not been addressed. And therefore, there's need for goodwill.
What would be the implications of that? Entering an election season without some of those recommendations being implemented, what would be the ramifications of that?
Yeah, I think it creates difficulty for officers who are responsible for enforcing the law. On the one hand, you have commands of court to do the right thing. On the other, the government and maybe the ruling party, which is an interested party in the election, is issuing orders to maybe for disruption to officers who are required to be non-partisan. So it creates an area of discomfort for such officers. Secondly, Africa and Uganda, and all the other African countries aspire to be democratic. And therefore, one of the principles of democracy is that there should be separation of powers, respect for the different arms of government. So if the courts have said that government should come up with these regulations, government should change behavior in this, government should not be arbitrary.
But according to this behavior and what you're seeing, do you think African governments in that regard are afraid of an informed citizenry? We are going to link to my reporter, Mbide, who is in Chireka, but this is my last question for you. Do you think African governments in this regard, by just shutting down the internet, there were 122 major shutdowns in 2019 in 21 countries. So do you think these African countries are actually afraid of an informed citizenry?
Yeah, why else would they be shutting down internet?
Because for them, they might say that it's because of security. We don't want the instigation of violence on social media and other internet platforms. But then other experts contend that maybe they're just afraid of an informed citizenry. What do you make of that?
I think the an informed citizen is good in the sense that they respect the law, but also they assert their rights. And when they are not informed, they can be cheated, they can be manipulated.
So if these citizens understand their right and decide to sue, we saw Bobby Wine sue the over-the-top, protest the over-the-top tax, but they were intercepted by police and arrested. So in that regard, what else can the citizens do? Because there's a stark disconnect between the government and the people they are leading in that regard. And that space is continuing to grow every day. Protests have not achieved anything. The Palmer Act was instituted just to rein in on that, and the Computer Misuse Act to rein in just that. So, in your opinion, what are these other alternatives the citizens can employ in the interim? Courts have not done anything.
Yes, courts have really been an area of concern, especially when it comes to... So,
in a minute, what other alternatives might the citizens have?
No, I think the different arms of government how to play their rightful role. For example, it is a concern that people bring complaints to court. Either they are not heard or they take too long to hear them. So that's an area of concern. But what citizens can do, they should not get tired.
Okay.
They should keep to use the law to enforce their rights, they should go to court, they should protest, they should engage parliament, they should engage the executive, so that there's good understanding that rights are good for everyone.
Indeed. That is Gilbert Sendugwa, the Executive Director of the African Freedom of Information Center. The issue we've been talking about is the African Declaration of Internet Rights and Freedom, and whether or not Uganda has been adhering to the principles of that African Declaration and other African countries in the sub-Saharan areas. And the global economy lost over $8 billion. Sub-Saharan Africa did lose $2 billion. So they need to harmonize internet laws so that we make it cheaper and increase voter education, political mobilization, and all that on the internet. Right about now, I'd like to link to my reporter, Stephen Bide, who's right there staged at Chireka for an underground conversation. Yes, Mbede, a very good morning, my brother. What are you doing in Chireka, and what is the latest?